About 26% of Gen Z owns homes. And for all the crying online about how housing has been unaffordable and how Gen Z will never own homes, I want to bring a perspective for you guys today about how exactly you can go about owning a home, but more importantly, has home buying become the new college? What I mean by this is, has home buying become the thing that we as a generation have been told we have to do to be successful, but does it actually pan out in reality? W Biker, by the way. My point with this is there has been a lot of changes in the recent market that has made home buying look less and less attractive if you're just looking at it on a purely mathematical basis on how to get ahead. For example, the cost of owning a home right now, I think, is somewhere in the mid $2,000 range, which is about $1,000 more than the average rent in the US. Now, of course, these numbers will all vary depending on where you live, but I'm making a rule to the general public and some food for thought for some people who may be trapped in a mindset that they didn't actually create themselves. Why has the boomer dream just automatically assumed its way down to the younger generations? Now, I don't have a good explanation for that, but I do have a solution for the housing problem that Gen Z faces today. The first solution is, how about we consider not buying a home? I'm not going to make assumptions and theoretical calculations on how much you could potentially have invested if you would have rented versus bought and housing appreciation. I think it's too variable to have such definitive answers like that, but I'm going to speak to the current market. So the current market reality is that renting is cheaper than owning. And with that extra money that you're saving on housing, you could easily be investing that into an income producing asset instead of just a house that grows with inflation on average or a little higher, unless you try and go into a boom or bust housing market. I think there's also a lot of benefits to renting, like the fact that you don't necessarily own the property, so you don't have to worry about as much of the maintenance. You don't have to worry about banks at all. You don't have to worry about lenders. And you also can move a lot easier. Houses are super illiquid, but you can rent houses for months or years at a time, so it depends on your situation. Renting isn't always bad, and just because you're quote-unquote paying for someone else's mortgage, that doesn't mean that you should necessarily get a mortgage for yourself, because that mortgage doesn't account for all the other operating expenses. You see, real estate business is completely different than just owning a home by yourself and for yourself. Now, there's a lot to say about sentimental value and people who actually want to buy a home, but this is for people who are sort of on the fence. I want to kind of like ask the question, why exactly do you feel so pressed to buy a home? Is it because you have valid reasons, like you just simply love the idea of home ownership, doing your own customizations with your home, making it the exact spec, etc., etc.? Or is it that because you've been told that if you don't own a house, you're unsuccessful, or that you need to own a house because you're paying for someone else's mortgage, right? These sort of like half-truths that are told that everyone just seems to accept. But yeah, I think this is a super valid question to ask yourself and sort of analyze if you have your own reasons for buying a house that are external from just what society or your parents or your grandparents have told you. Holy shit, dude, what are you doing? Go. Oh, bro. This dude could have went like 5 times, bro. Ban that shit. But let me also propose you with another idea and how exactly I personally am going about attempting to buy a house. Now, this is going to be for the more entrepreneurial type. I'm sure at this point a lot of people have heard of house hacking. If you haven't, it's essentially where you buy a house, or rather a small apartment or duplex that's 4 units or less. You live in 1 unit, you rent out the rest. You get to take advantage of things like an FHA loan. Basically, if it's your first home, you can get away with putting down as little as 3%. And this could be really good for people who want to get into home ownership and want to get into some sort of entrepreneurial endeavors. You're essentially becoming a landlord and living for cheap, if not free. Or you're getting paid to live. It really depends on the market and what property you buy. The main point of this is to save on rent, to build a small business, and still get into that home ownership. Now, personally, I would love to own a home later in the future. I love the idea of customizing everything in my life, hence the JDM Miata. I also plan on starting a real estate business, and this is a really good way to kick off that endeavor. So if you've ever been interested in real estate but haven't had the capital to buy a commercial building or just a single family home that you can rent out, think of house hacking. You could potentially cut your cost of living dramatically, if not be paid to live somewhere, and you would be doing the same operations that you would want to do anyways. Personally, my strategy with this would be put down 5 to 10% on the property, have a 3 or 4-plex, preferably more units, have a good cushion, 6 months to 12 months of operating expenses, somewhere in the region of there, and buy something that I could potentially have added value in. Meaning that, let's say you upgrade the floors for, let's make it easy, $1,000. And you're like, okay, because the floors are upgraded, I can charge an additional $10 a month in rent, which is $120 a year. You're also adding value to the property. So the property is going to be appreciating and your investment is going to be returning you money. I really love this idea. I can get super nerdy into it. But the basic idea is that you can function this property as a start to your real estate endeavors. This might not appeal to the masses. And honestly, a lot of people don't want to have the headache of being a landlord. Because yes, although it sounds good on paper, you are going to have to deal with all the struggles of a landlord, and on top of the fact that you're going to be living right next to your tenants. So if you're not down for that, then that's fine. You don't have to follow exactly what I do, but I have a final solution that I think can be really good for a lot of people. And that is simply buying homes in the traditional method. And now what I mean by traditional method is essentially how my parents got into home ownership. You hear all the time about the stats of like the median house is now like $150,000 to buy, which by the way is insane. That's more than my parents' house, and we live in Illinois. I thought we had like a decent sized home, especially where I came from. But essentially this stat becomes irrelevant when you realize, hey, you can buy homes that are actually, cheaper than $450,000. And guess what? There's plans like the VA loans or FHA loans where you can get a housing at cheaper basis. The strategy I would implore you to do if you're just looking to own a house, just a single individual family home, is first of all, have a good emergency fund. I'm talking 6 to 12 months of expenses, depending on how crazy you want to go with it and how variable your income is. Then the next thing is, I would recommend putting down as much as you feel makes sense for your situation. And what I mean by that is, you don't necessarily have to put 50% down on a house to make it make sense. Now, if it's not an income producing one, you probably want to get closer to that 20% so you can avoid that private mortgage insurance or the PMI, which is an additional charge that you're going to have on top of all your other expenses. But essentially the strategy you want to do with finding a home, and what I've seen personally work in my life, or I guess I should say via my parents, who bought their first home in, I think, 2004 or something like that, for about $100,000. Essentially what you want to do is you want to buy a home that's actually a starter home. No, it doesn't have to be a 3-bed, 2-bath, okay? I know that's like the standard, but it doesn't have to be like that, or if it doesn't meet your means. So look for houses that are below the median in a decent area that is on either historically, like Chicago area has been rising, or is a big booming city. For example, Phoenix. You want to avoid places potentially like Austin where housing has gone down. Once you find that house, you want to see what makes sense for you. If I was doing this, I would try to get into a real estate market that's growing and that I see either long-term growth from or a booming real estate market such as Phoenix or Miami, and put down 5 to 20% down. And just so I can follow the rule that my housing does not take up more than 25% of my gross annual pay. Now, this may seem a little strict, especially since renting is only 33%, but if you're gonna do this, you do not want your house to be where all your money's going. And people are gonna say, oh, that's unrealistic, median house that, medium wage this, right? But that just means you're not ready to buy a house yet. You need to either get your money up, or you need to be looking at different areas to buy houses in. It's a sad truth, but if you're gonna go this method, that's really the only way you got. This method is a low and slow method. Essentially, what you're doing is you're buying a home, you're waiting essentially so you can roll over the equity in the home, put some extra cash down, and buy a bigger house. Maybe you get from the below median house to the median house. A few years after that, you then maybe upgrade to the bigger house, the above average house. Now, again, this will take probably 30 years, 30, 40 years to pan out. You'll get your dream house by the time you're retiring for sure, or, you know, maybe your 40s or 50s. And that's cool. If that's the way you want to go, if you don't want to go that entrepreneurial route, I completely get it. But this is basically just the make sure your house is not too much part of your life, and make sure you buy in an area that's not decreasing in value. Now, personally, I am not doing this method, and I would recommend it for certain cases, but I do think a lot of people, especially young people, should consider the other options available, such as renting or becoming a landlord. So yeah, that's it. I really just wanted to discuss housing today because I see it all over the place. My friends talk about it all the time. People on the internet talk about it all the time. And these are a lot of myths that go around, and a lot of unuseful thoughts that, dude, another W biker, what? Okay. So I really hope you got value out of this, and maybe drop your comments and thoughts below. I don't have this shit all figured out. I don't even have a property myself, but this is what I've seen work for other people and in my personal life. So I thought I'd share it and give y'all some perspective, and maybe you guys can give me some feedback. I'd love to hear it. Thank y'all for watching, and see y'all on the next one. Peace.